I'm Kathryn Rose, founder and CEO of channelWise. channelWise is a platform that provides channel partners access to vetted, been there, done that experts for one-on-one video consultations that will help them go farther, faster in their business. And today we welcome channelWise expert Lori Leavitt, also known as the Pivot Catalyst. Lori is the founder and president of A Bridge Group, which offers the Aligned Momentum Leadership Operating System and 10X Business and Leadership Private Peer Advisory Groups. Welcome, Lori. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here, Kathryn.
So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got that moniker, the Pivot Catalyst.
Well, one, I gave myself the moniker, but people have been using it. In 2017, and the idea for the book came in about 2013, I wrote a book called The Pivot, Orchestrating Extraordinary Business Momentum. And in the process, I don't know if have you written a book? I can't recall.
I've actually written 9.
9 books. So see, I should know that. When you're writing a book, I'm sure you'll agree with this, you get inspiration for yourself as well. Not just what do I want to share and express with others so that they feel and do something differently. How do I make my book valuable? But as you go through that process, you get ahas for yourself as well. And that's what I did when I realized that my past was, I would call it decision support. But when you're in decision support, the decisions are being made for significant change. A leader isn't asking for decision support for something that isn't significant. And those, we didn't used to call them pivots, but they really, in a larger organization especially, are what was only being penned in entrepreneurial world as pivots. And in the entrepreneurial world, it was typically used for just the decision to change. And yes, that's fast. But the awareness that one needs to change is not fast, whether it's you or whether it's for your organization. And the results, the realization of that from this place to another place is not fast. So when business leaders were approaching the pivot as a project or an initiative or something that didn't require their continuous attention, it was going to fail. And so I felt compelled to write the book, and also realized that I had all of this knowledge and expertise to help leaders orchestrate that culture where everyone is ready to change.
So talk a little bit about the book. You mentioned that, it came out of this idea of helping folks get ready, along that path to change, because it isn't fast, right? As you mentioned, knowing that I think a lot of us know that we need to change, but I think also, as you mentioned, from the entrepreneurial world, it's like, oh, squirrel, pivot, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. So talk about that process of, that knowing you have to pivot and then getting into that mind frame and then actually executing on that.
Yes. And one thing important to add is whether it's just you're making a personal change, or it's you leading an organization of a few or many people, it's never just you that's required to realize that whatever you envision. Which is why I wrote the second book, Pivot to Clarity, because you need to get clear enough for you to set direction. And then you need to communicate clearly so that everybody knows what's going on and they can commit to it, and it's inspiring and compelling to them. And so when you are knowing that you need to change, well, one is getting that awareness that you need to change. So I know we're talking with some that are smaller business owners or those that are closer to the work to be done. And so regardless of where you are, your life is busy. And I would bet that you don't take time to pause, that you don't take time to think of what will be extraordinary, that you head into those strategy meetings, if you have them at all, and they are incremental at best. What can we improve on from last year? And you're really never, as the leader of the organization, allowing yourself, or the CEO of your own life, allowing yourself to be in awe and go, what would be extraordinary. What would be possible? And then when you allow yourself that thought, how do you have the strength to not immediately interrupt yourself and talk yourself out of it and say, well, that's not possible, or I don't have the people that could do that, or I can't explain this to them because they'll just put it down. And then those extraordinary things don't happen. And so unless you're going towards something extraordinary, you're not going to have momentum. It's just day after day fighting fires after fighting fires.
I think
And
that's
so
a
the
real
first thing
big
is just taking that pause.
Yeah, I think that's a really big challenge for a lot of business owners, especially, is taking that pause because it is a constant battle to fight fires every single day. So that's a really great advice to make sure that you do take that pause, vision, try to envision what the extraordinary is, right? And put in some place to work with it. You do have another book, right? Orchestrating Extraordinary Momentum.
So that is the name of the series. So the first book, The Pivot, Orchestrating Extraordinary Business Momentum, is where I came up with these. One, the concept that I was just describing about the changes that pass fast, and that leaders, though, can create an organization where when the change is needed, they're not pushing. They're not trying to get buy-in, compliance, etc. It's that change is that the organization is nimble and people just know that change is part of their jobs and they're empowered to make those changes and speak out and step up. And so that's what I describe in that book. And of the 6 aligned momentum key indicators that I came up with, how do you measure if you're even in this place, right? How do you measure progress? The first one is clarity, and that's what the second book was. So like you writing many books, there are 6 aligned momentum key indicators, and there will be 6 more books after the first one.
I see. So you've come up with this operating system, and you're going kind of in depth in each one of these books. But you also, I wanted to kind of step back a minute. Why is it important for leaders to cultivate this culture of experimentation, of innovation, in order for them to be able to lead their teams into an successful pivot?
And so, how does it feel to you when you're feeling you're having to push?
Yeah.
And you're communicating and you're trying to find the words and no one's getting it. Or that they're assuming that it's bad. And so it's partially that. It is having that communication where it's a safe place. So there's some experimentation even in the conversation, so that there's this openness, that people aren't assuming the worst, that you aren't feeling like you have to push, that you aren't feeling that you as the leader, the be all end all, and the person who has to be an expert in everything. It requires leading an organization that's both focused and nimble, meaning focused at the work at hand, but nimble in that they know what the direction is. And so that when someone's going into their work the next day and maybe something new is coming up, or maybe it's just the same old, but the direction is new, and they have that filter in their head and they can say, well, here is where we're going. So am I going to do just what I did yesterday or not? Am I going to do something else? And if I do something else, am I safe and empowered to do that something else? It's like that.
Right.
And so if we don't create this, then people are going to do what you expect. They're going to do what they think you expect.
Okay.
And how often is it not what we expect and not moving us toward our vision because we haven't put these things in place?
So you said the first thing is clarity, coming to that realization. And then, when you come to that realization, how do you get it set up so that you're not pushing? Because I remember, I'm going to date myself again. I always do on these broadcasts, but like, Who Moved My Cheese and Building a Better Mousetrap. And like those books were huge back in the day. And when you were literally building a better mousetrap. I mean, it wasn't like the sand was consistently shifting under your feet. And that's the way I feel, even as a founder, new technology and new technology, new technology, new techniques, right? So you've come to this clarity, you're starting to communicate that. How do you get it to that point where, this pivot or the momentum that you're trying to get in going in your organization? How do you get that to that next level?
I bet that I'm trying to relate this to everyone and not just talk about big companies. I would bet everyone during the pandemic, as a leader, did a little "let's try this"
Yeah.
when it wasn't something that you did before. Now you have people that are remote. Let's do something a little bit new. But that's not a natural thing. It was uncomfortable and you went, "Well, this will end, and now it's gonna get back to our normal processes." And so one is, what would it take for you to continue in that, I don't know it all, and not everything is set in stone. And the other is to look at models. I write a lot about Microsoft and Satya Nadella. I mean, he stepped into Microsoft when the share price was down by 40% over the past 13 years. I mean, the business was unwell. And certainly shareholders were scrambling to have share price go up.
Mm-hmm.
He had the wherewithal. He paused. And then had the wherewithal to say, this is the crux of the matter, is how we're working together. And so I am going to test that. He had meetings with people. One meeting, he pulled senior managers together. The coach asked them to write a purpose statement. Everybody wrote. Then they were asked to share and no one wanted to share. That is an indication of being unwell. He was willing to get to that and then say, I'm going to address culture first. It is our competitive nature that is so close to Microsoft. It is throughout the organization that needs to be addressed. Now, do you think that he made that a project or that it would be done in 6 months or a year? No. But has he made progress? Absolutely. And why I give that also as a model, not only is it just extraordinary, but anyone can go online and research it and use that as a model. In my own team, for example, during the pandemic, I had the bright idea we didn't have daily huddles at the time. I had the bright idea to have daily huddles. Great idea, right? Get people together more often. Well, I have a self-managed team, and they felt that those meetings meant that they had to have something significantly done every day,
Mm-hmm.
that they had to have something important to add. And so what would have happened if I just pushed it? It's the right thing to do, right? Daily huddles are a great thing. But no, I mean, I had to find out from them to understand why are these not working? Why are these feeling heavy to you? If we're doing these for just connection, what would work for you? And for us, it ended up being turning into weekly, and also over time, getting them more comfortable with bringing up personal matters, because all of that fit into the business momentum. It's not just the work that's being done, it's how people are feeling and behaving that also makes a huge difference in your organization.
Well, I think that's a really important point that you bring up. Obviously, as a leader, you saw that was happening. You saw that they were being uncomfortable, and then you asked, what's making you uncomfortable about this? How can we make this work for you? So, how can leaders really, balance that need to pivot, as you were saying, and maintain that stability inside their organization? Because there, even if you wanted to, kind of change the direction, it's like turning a battleship, right? It's not like just, a quick thing, but in the meantime, as you're going toward this extraordinary ideal, you still have day-to-day tasks that have to be done. So how can leaders kind of balance that?
I do two things and recommend two things. One is, I am a strong proponent of innovation, not necessarily the lean requirement to change something every day. So this is why I use the phrase focused and nimble, focusing at the work at hand, and nimble in that you understand the direction and you're checking in your role, your power to check in your role to say, is this what I'm going to do tomorrow? But there's not a requirement to change something. That to me, that becomes counter. It then becomes another rule. Okay, we're going to get in trouble if we don't change something. It's more about the flow of work and working together and what makes sense based on everyone being aligned with where the organization is headed. The other is, so one is being focused and nimble. And ask me your question again, because I need to make sure I put this second one into context.
I was just saying, what's important for leaders to put in place to get to that extraordinary ideal organization that they want to get to, but also maintain that stability in the organization as they go.
Okay, so one is focused and nimble, and the other is to really work on empowerment. And so you as a leader rarely know how the work is actually being done. So even start on it in the strategy. So the new software I've created, one thing that addresses it's just kind of small tweaks, but important tweaks in what you're already doing, is when you're sitting, and usually it's a senior leadership team sitting in a strategic planning session. No, that's fine. You have the more global view, but you don't know how the work is actually being done. And so when you're in the strategy session and you're saying, this is what we envision, and you're going through some idea, well, can we even do that this year? And who might do that? Let that be just your framework of measurement. And then broadcast it out to those that are closer to the work. Maybe it's the managers of teams. And say, where does your team fit? Which of these do they fit with? And how would you measure progress in your team? And we just don't do that. We do the top down, or we do top down, bottom up, top down, or really not getting to the, you tell us what progress would look like and be part of this. And that is really important to continuing to keep that flow happening.
Great. So we're almost out of time. So I wanted to just touch base on this last point, is how do you see leadership and workplace culture evolving in the future? I mean, as I said, sand is shifting underneath our feet. And how can leaders really stay ahead of this curve?
I mentioned wellness early on, that Microsoft was unwell and that he looked at financials, but then he also looked at how people are being with each other. And so wellness can continue to be something you need to look at in the future. It's not just a wellness program of someone's body and maybe adding some mental health cues. How are you holding one-on-ones? How are you holding conversations? Are your managers getting the one-on-ones with someone above them, or are they completely burned out? Become someone who notices how people are being and feeling, and that you are someone open, and that all the managers have time to be open for their people to come to them with what matters. I mean, I'm only mentioning this because it is the future, and it's not going to get better. It's right now, it's getting worse. As we have layoffs, that means what? People are doing more work because it takes time for the work to be done to catch up with the fewer people in place. The other is, we have to, as leaders, go back to what I talked about earlier with the pause and being, what would be extraordinary. We have to do better work to understand, or to get a feel for, what our organization should look like in the future, and have the courage to communicate in a way that people are inspired by it, because Sure, during a pandemic, there was an urgency for people to pivot, and we were seeing some quick pivots. But when there's not something urgent, why would I go out and change my skills? Why would I, have this busy work day and then go take training? Or step up and say something else needs to be done in my role, but it's gonna, take me time to shift from what I was doing before, which is easy, to learning something new. So how are you going to, as a leader, create that place where people are also looking at, all right, so this is the future. We are part of getting ready for it.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for your expertise. We appreciate you being on the channelWise platform. And all of you out there listening, if you'd like to get some deeper advice on this, head over to Lori's expert profile on channelWise. We'll go ahead and put the link into the post, and we'll also put the information in about her books and everything as well. Thank you again, Lori. We really appreciate you joining us today. And until next time, everyone.